Building one's own home is a significant milestone in life. Let me share the story of how my marriage fell apart just after reaching the pinnacle of happiness. My name is Abigail, and I'm 30. My family consists of my 35-year-old husband, Gary, and our 3-year-old daughter, Sarah. We decided to build our dream home. Now, you might think, well, smooth sailing and full of happiness, huh? Lucky you. That's what most people would assume. But for me, it's far from the truth. Recently, between the ongoing construction of our new house and issues with my in-laws, I've had endless worries. The first crack in our relationship started when we left Sarah at my in-laws' house. Both my husband and I work, so we hardly have any free time during the weekdays. We usually spend our weekends searching for the right materials and consulting on the house's design. When we'd bring Sarah along, she'd get bored and restless, so we'd usually leave her with my parents who live nearby. But one morning, my father fell ill and had to go to the doctor, so he couldn't look after Sarah. I thought we should cancel our plans for the day. However, Gary suggested, what about leaving her at my parents' place? To be honest, I don't get along well with my in-laws. They believe there's no need to respect their son's wife. In their eyes, since I married into the family, they can say whatever they want. What era are they living in? And I felt bad suddenly asking them to babysit a 3-year-old. But if we postponed today's consultation, the house's completion would be delayed. Despite my hesitations, we decided to leave Sarah with the in-laws for the day. Once we finished our errands, we stopped by a store and bought some expensive pastries as a thank you gift and headed straight to the in-laws' place. By the time we got there in the evening, and maybe because of the gift, they seemed to be in a good mood. After thanking my Mill and Phil, on our way home, Sarah asked, "Where's Grandpa and Grandma's room in our new house?" "Honey, what do you mean? Did Grandpa and Grandma ask you that? What did you tell them?" I told them I didn't know. She then went back to chatting with her stuffed penguin. She calls my parents Granddad and Granny. So Grandpa and Grandma could only mean Gary's parents. Maybe they were curious if there's a guest room for them in our new house. Back then, I truly believed it was like that. From that day on, my in-laws started visiting frequently, especially during the evenings on weekdays or holidays when we were home. Right now, to save up for our house, we've been living in a small, older apartment. Every time my in-laws come over, they'd immediately settle down on our dining chairs or sofa, demanding to see the blueprints and paperwork of our house still under construction. Before I could say anything, Gary would eagerly show them, giving a detailed explanation. Why does he show them every time? It's already irksome they come over so often. Then, a barrage of questions would come my way from my Mill. Just like answering questions in a Congress meeting. It wasn't my husband on the hot seat, but me. I could almost hear the debate moderator's voice. "Mill, you may speak. This blueprint, the location of the kitchen, it's not very functional here, is it? Change it. We need more spare guest rooms. It's always good to have extra space. Plus, with only one kid's room, what happens if you have another child? What are your thoughts on the declining birth rate?" I'm sorry, that last bit was a joke. Thankfully, I wasn't really questioned about population issues. Seems it's my turn to reply now. Ms. Abigail. Well, based on discussions with my husband and the construction protocols, we've already started the groundwork with the contractors. It's now impossible to change the layout, so I hope you understand. I replied somewhat angrily. Then, questions about furniture and appliances poured in. My Mill claims she's a home expert. I have many friends, so I've been to various homes and observed different rooms. With my experience, I can easily spot comfortable rooms and good quality furniture. This house and room are not good at all. Bad vibes, so things won't go smoothly. It's terrible. The expert, huh? She really laid it on thick, but she's just a nobody. My Mill was so annoying that I jokingly started to say, "How about we make it a multi-generational home and split the costs 50-50? But my in-laws were furious. "Are you asking us for money? You ungrateful child. Multi-generational home. I hate the idea of having to live so reserved and formally." That day, my in-laws left early. Good riddance. You're not my real parents, and I don't owe you any respect. Rather than parents, they're more like guardians. Later that night, after putting our daughter to bed, my husband approached me, looking frustrated. "Dad and Mom mean well, so don't be so cold to them." Cold? I didn't intend to be. Rather, aren't your parents being much more rude? They constantly interfere with our home decisions. It's like they always look down on me, thinking I'm just the daughter-in-law. They're parents, so it's natural. It's rude to dismiss their advice like that. You really don't get how people feel, do you? Just cool your head and think about it. From that moment, my husband turned his back and didn't speak to me. I get that they're your parents, but we're a separate household, and we haven't received any financial support from them. They don't contribute money but have a lot to say. Isn't that rude? My husband told me to cool down, but rather than cooling off, I was boiling with anger over the unfairness, making it hard to sleep. After some ups and downs, our house was finally completed. Just as our family was excitedly moving into our new home, something happened. My parents are moving in with us starting today. My dad can have the bigger room upstairs, and the smaller one should be fine for my mom. Whoa, hold on a minute. Where is this coming from? We had decided to make one of the rooms upstairs for Sarah. I was never told about this. Besides, your folks might just say they don't like the rooms, knowing them. They won't complain. They've already seen the rooms. Don't worry. Your parents checked out the rooms. When? The day before we went to see the house. Wait a second. You're telling me they saw the house before we did? Yay. They wanted to see it, so I lent them the key I had. It's not a big deal. My husband seemed irritated and went back to working on the TV cables he had left half done. It's not a big deal. Well, it is now. It just became a big deal. I didn't want to see my husband's face, so I left the kitchen where I was unpacking and headed upstairs. I locked the door and tried to clear my head, which was a mess of anger and confusion. I was grateful that I had dropped Sarah off at daycare because of all the unpacking. It gave me some space and time to think. This sudden announcement about living with the in-laws made me completely fed up with both my husband and his parents. I don't want to spend another second with them. But we had just bought this house, a significant investment. I need to calm down and think rationally. I need to determine what needs to be said and what doesn't, for the future of my daughter and me. I stayed in my room, thinking deeply, waiting for my in-laws to arrive. As my husband said, they arrived in the afternoon, along with a truck loaded with their stuff. You could at least greet us. Honestly, such rude people. Oh my, nothing's unpacked yet. You're so slow. After complaining for a bit, the in-laws entered our new home as if it was their own. From upstairs, where I had been listening, I headed to the entrance. Excuse me, but I wasn't informed about this living arrangement. My voice, much to my surprise, was icy cold. My Phil seemed annoyed and quickly retorted. I told Gary, that should be enough. No, it's not. The first I heard about your intention to move in was this morning from Gary. And I have no intention of living with the likes of you, especially after such disrespect. What? Gary agreed to it. You think you can just defy your husband like that? Yay. Such a presumptuous daughter-in-law. If you don't like it, maybe you should leave. This is hopeless. I've always thought we just couldn't communicate properly with them. As I contemplated how to respond, my husband came rushing over. What the hell, Abigail? Why are you fighting with my parents? Fight. This isn't a mere argument. I'm being berated solely for being the daughter-in-law. And now, I'm being blamed by my husband. I realized once again Gary was just like his father, like son. Gary, I can't possibly live with your parents. Why not? You're making this difficult for me. As my wife, you should follow my lead, right? I'm not just a mere wife. I'm an individual person. You think you can force me to obey? Upon hearing our exchange, Gary's father exclaimed, "We don't need such a daughter-in-law in our home." Then, Gary agreed, maybe you're right. If she can't respect my parents, maybe we should divorce. I had been waiting for this. All right, let's get a divorce then, I stated clearly. My husband was the one who asked for divorce, and I, the wife, just agreed to what he wanted. I hope my phone in my pocket would record our entire conversation properly. With that hope, I continued. Since we'll be strangers now, please pay me back the $350,000 I loaned you for this house's construction. What? His parents gasped in shock, looking completely baffled. Gary's face turned pale as he looked at me. I patiently explained to his surprised parents. Seems like there's some confusion. Gary didn't contribute a single cent for this house. I paid for it with my savings because this man, with no sense of planning, had no savings. We both worked and contributed equally to our living expenses. The remaining money was supposed to be saved individually. But he wasted his money instead of saving it. Hey Abigail, that's enough. It's all true. And yet, when it came to buying a house, you insisted it be under your name. That's why I loaned the money to you. We even have a written agreement, so you can't deny it. No way. Leaving my dumbfounded husband and in-laws behind, I quickly packed my essentials, my daughter's favorite toys, and clothes into suitcases and duffel bags. I held her favorite stuffed penguin close to me. I loaded everything into my compact car and drove off, bidding farewell to the newly built house I had briefly called home. I picked up my daughter from daycare and headed to my parents' home in Nebraska. My parents, in their sweats, were taken aback by my sudden appearance with so much luggage. It's sudden, and I know it's a bother, so if it's inconvenient, I can stay at a motel. I asked hesitatedly, and they quickly assured me it was fine. Later I found out that they had been worried I might harm my daughter or myself. In reality, I had sworn to protect her no matter what. I shared the whole story with them. I explained my decision to divorce Gary, and my determination to raise our daughter alone. They promised they would fully support me. They also suggested I stay with them for a while. This offer was a great relief since I was working. That night, I documented all that had transpired between Gary, his parents, and me. I also saved the voice recordings of our conversations on my computer and external drive. Armed with this evidence, I visited several law firms on my days off. Finally, I found a trustworthy lawyer and formally hired them. With the hustle and bustle of everyday life, a week flew by since the day I left my new house. On that day, after finishing work and leaving the office, someone was waiting for me. It was my husband. Or I prefer to say ex-husband, but since the paperwork hasn't gone through yet, he's still technically my husband on paper. I had no intention of talking to him, but the fear of him turning aggressive kept me on edge. So, I suggested we go somewhere public, and we entered a coffee shop together. I made sure not to forget to turn on the recording function of my phone, just in case. Trying to stay calm, I asked him, "Do you have something to talk about?" "Yes, about the house. I'll transfer it to you and change the name on the deed. So can we call it even regarding the money?" "I'm sorry, but I can't live in that house anymore." "Your parents set foot in it before us, right? Why sweat the small stuff? It's not a small thing for me, so it's a no." Saying that, I took a sip of my coffee and observed my ex-husband closely. His hair was a mess, sticking out in places. He had grown some stubble on his chin, and he looked pale. Though he was wearing a suit, the shirt underneath was wrinkled. It looked like he hadn't ironed it or even sent it for cleaning. I wondered what kind of life he was leading, but he looked worn out. "Please, Abigail, I can't pay back that large sum of money so easily." "You knew it was a large sum when you borrowed it, right? I had suggested we put both our names on the house, or even just mine. But you insisted it be in your name, saying it was my house. That was because I thought I was the homeowner. I never really meant to get a divorce. I thought you'd know I was just bluffing. I was serious. I'm done with you, and I'm definitely getting a divorce. Not just because you lack responsibility, but I can't handle your rude parents either. But I have to go. Sarah is waiting for me." "Wait, I'm taking Sarah." Fear crossed my mind at my ex-husband's words. When I returned to my parents' house, I asked them to be careful, fearing he might possibly take Sarah. A few days after the visit from my ex-husband, I was informed that my in-laws were at Sarah's daycare. I left work early and rushed to the daycare. Thankfully, I had informed the daycare beforehand, so they had my in-laws waiting in another room. They ensured my in-laws wouldn't see Sarah. As soon as I entered the room where my in-laws were, they started shouting at me. "Give us our granddaughter back, you gold-digging thief." "What do you mean by thief? I haven't stolen anything." "If you're not a thief, then you must be a con artist. You must have done something shady to get that kind of money. At your age, it doesn't make sense for you to have so much money." "No, all the money I lent to Gary was mine. It's all hard-earned. It's a combination of my savings and the gift money given to me by my parents and my grandmother." "What? Gift money?" "Yes, every year, they gifted me a certain amount so it wouldn't incur taxes." It was directly deposited into my account. That, combined with the money I got from selling some stocks under my name and my savings, is the total amount. You mean all that money was really yours? Didn't you give any gift money to Gary? You can still do it, you know. My Phil grunted and went silent. They splurge on expensive things and like to show off, loving luxury above all. Being a regular working-class family with no passive income, it's clear they probably don't have much in savings. It's pretty obvious they'd never have thought of gifting money like my parents did. I'm sorry, but I'm divorcing Gary. I'll be taking custody of Sarah. Please don't come to the daycare anymore. With that said, I quickly got Sarah into the car and headed straight to my parents' home. Despite my warnings, Gary and my in-laws showed up several times after that. Every time they did, I tried to talk calmly and send them away. However, they often grabbed my arm or shouted nasty things at me. I recorded everything on my phone. About a month after I left our new home, I sent a letter through my lawyer, demanding repayment of debts and a divorce agreement. My ex-husband generally agreed, but he wanted to fight for custody of Sarah. However, when I mentioned I'd ask for alimony due to the divorce, his face went pale. He became much quieter. After all, I had plenty of evidence against him. And he had no savings. It took some time, but I eventually won custody of Sarah, got the money I loaned my ex-husband back, and finalized the divorce. It took longer than expected to receive all the debt repayments from my ex. That's because the sale of our new house didn't go as planned. Initially, I thought Gary and his parents would live in the new house, but they didn't. The reason was simple. They couldn't pay the $350,000 for the house. Gary had no savings, and even if his parents sold their old home, it wouldn't be enough. In the end, they had to list the new house for less than what they bought it for. After several price drops, they finally found a buyer. The difference between the buying and selling price, along with the real estate commission, was borrowed from the bank by my ex. Losing the house and being in debt, my ex ended up living with his parents in their old, run-down house. To add to that, Gary's divorced sister moved back in with her 2 teenage sons. Those sons are in middle school and high school. Their cramped and old home, now housing 6 people, became infamous in the neighborhood for the constant arguing. Thankfully, that family no longer bothered us. Given that he can barely afford child support, it's no surprise he has no face to show around. 4 years have passed since then, and my daughter Sarah is now in the 2nd grade. We currently rent a place near my parents' home. On days when I get home late, my parents look after Sarah. We're getting by and enjoying our days together. I thought of staying single and living this way forever, but I've started dating someone. He's a 36-year-old man with a previous marriage and a 1st-grade daughter. We started talking because we often ran into each other during drop-offs and pickups, and he confessed his feelings for me. Lately, we've been going out together with our daughters. The other day, Sarah casually mentioned, if we ever build a house, it'd be nice if all 4 of us had our own rooms and maybe we could get a dog. My heart skipped a beat. Actually, he proposed to me a while ago. Both of us also have daughters to think of first, so I haven't given him a proper answer yet, but I've made up my mind. I approached Sarah, hugged her tight, and said, "That sounds wonderful. I'd love to build a new home. This time, we can discuss it as a family and make sure it's a home where everyone can be happy."